Our story starts in the middle of the last millennium, where, over the course of a couple of centuries, guns replaced bows. But there was an exception. One warrior culture had archers that were so good that they defeated enemies with guns again and again. Their horse archers were one of the main reasons the Spanish never conquered North America. The same Spanish conquistadors who had defeated nation after nation had no chance against these fast-shooting warriors. They kept the Spanish and Americans at bay until the second half of the 19th century, where the development of the six-shooter pistol allowed the legendary Texas Rangers to come close to matching their shooting speed. In fact, the revolver, as the six-shooter was called, was developed because of these legendary horse archers. They were the Comanche. Now, Lars Anderson looks at recreating their way of archery. It all began with an episode of the Joe Rogan podcast.
The way the Lars Anderson style of shooting,
A lot of the things that I frankly found hard to believe about Comanches, once I saw the Anderson videos, you believe them.
Yeah.
Both the guest and Rogan were referencing Lars's system of shooting, which was developed with inspiration from ancient Arabic and Asian sources. And it's quite easy to come to the conclusion that the Comanche used the bow and arrow in the same way. The two are not the same, however, as the Comanche hold their bows in the bow hand, not the shooting hand. They also shoot left around the bow and not right as Lars does. Lars was arguably the first modern archer who discovered, or rediscovered actually, a way to shoot 3 arrows in 1.5 seconds, a way using just one movement instead of several. No modern system of archery allows for the speed and accuracy we know the Comanches had while simultaneously obeying the two premises of arrows in the bow hand and shooting left around the bow. So what did Lars do? To start out with, he teamed up with Dave Mead, who's half Native American and shares his passion for archery history. Dave did some tests of his own using Lars's theories and came to similar conclusions. Conclusions matched by the word of author and teacher Eric Smith and notes taken by his grandfather.
At a distance of 300 feet, a Comanche could hit you with an arrow if you stood still. But since you could see the arrow coming, you had time to get out of the way. The only catch, you had to watch for the other 3 or 4 arrows that would be following the first. And what my great-great-grandfather is saying there is that a Comanche warrior, by the time he shot 1 arrow, he could have 3 or 4 more in the air before that first arrow hit. I myself have not been able to replicate that, but as you will see in this video, Lars, being a master archer, has practiced and will show you that this can be done.
4 or even 5 arrows hanging in the air, flying against an enemy. This is really fast. And we have other similar description. But we don't know any method with the arrows in a bow hand and arrows on the left who's nearly fast enough to do that.
They needed to find a system that will allow them to recreate Comanche horse archery. Now, Lars is no horseman, but since the Comanche were probably the best light cavalry in history, he also needed to test what it would be like to shoot from horseback. In other words, he needed a horse. But more on that in a moment. As for the Comanche, they had gotten horses from the Spanish around 1650 and had quickly perfected the art of riding and fast shooting, making them feared by both Spanish and indigenous tribes alike. We know that their 2 main weapons were 14-foot spears and superb quality bows and arrows. So Dave Mead built copies of historical weapons for Lars, and while they may look primitive, these Osage orange wood bows are both powerful and precise. They were originally meant for bison hunting. Unlike modern arrows, which are standardized in length, the Comanche had arrows of various sizes and draw lengths. They held their bows low using a short draw. The Comanche held the bow with a thumbs-up grip, and with a 3-finger pinch grip, sometimes while hanging from their saddles and using the horse as a shield. This created a problem. Neither Dave nor Lars were aware of a method that would fit the facts and allow for the ultra-fast shooting and for the occasional hanging from the side of a horse that the Comanche practiced. There is a method that allows the archer to take the arrow around the bow. This doesn't work while hanging from a horse, though, and also fails to produce the speeds needed. There's also another method, popular amongst horse archers, where you put the arrow through the bow, so to speak, but this is extremely dangerous when done with sharp arrows, and it also ends up being too slow. So while these two were both interesting, they were obviously not the answer. Lars then started doing what he does best, experimenting. It took many tests on his dummy horse, and even some on a real horse, before he found a method that actually worked. It turns out that if you preload the arrows, not only can you achieve the appropriate speed of shooting, you can also hang behind the horse with your draw hand free, and if you end up not shooting your arrows, you can put them back in your bow hand. This works well on horseback. And with the 3-finger pinch grip, you do not have to grip from either the left or right, but can grasp the arrow directly above the bowstring. This meant that Lars could draw and release in one movement, thus allowing for more or less the same level of speed shooting as he'd achieved with his own draw hand system. The next step was clear: recreating Comanche feats of archery using this newfound system. Here, history books came in handy, providing Lars with some goals to aim for. For example, we know from history books that as boys, the Comanches shot coins out of the air, 3 arrows in 1.5 seconds, and birds out of the sky. They were even known to be able to hit insects. No wonder they became terrifying as adults.
Obviously, you can't say this is the real Comanche system, but it fit all the historical description and the equipment.
But perhaps most surprising to Lars himself was the fact that it's relatively easy to teach newcomers to archery to shoot in this way. It turns out that this method of preloading and drawing and shooting in one movement is something almost anyone can learn. And if that is truly the case, that just makes the Comanche dedication to perfecting the style even more impressive.
Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.